To this story now, ANC branches and regional youth leagues have wrapped up nominations for leadership positions ahead of the National Elective Conference in December. The Youth League task team says they're backing former Health Minister Zweli Mkhize for ANC presidency. The meeting was held at Birchwood Conference Centre on Sunday. Let's get some analysis on this now from political analyst Lukhona Mnguni. Lukhona, good morning and thank you very much for your time. So the task team's leadership preferences have been all the talk since last night, some supporting them while others have criticized them, of course. What do you make of this list, though?
Well, good morning, Fundo, and to the viewers of eNCA. I think, look, the race is hotting and heating up, and you are getting a sense of where people are going to be deploying their energies in terms of who to go to branches and fight for. We must always remember that this conference is a conference of branches over about 90% of the delegates are really coming from branch, structures, and therefore the Youth League task team, like any other, structure, will have to go out to various branches of the ANC to sell their ticket and probably have a story that they are selling. It can't just be that you are backing former Health Minister Zweli Mkhize. I mean, it seems like it was a tight contest because I also see that, for some positions there was a tie of 2020 and, that had to be taken to a sort of re-election within the people who were in the room. So it by no means is an overwhelming majority of the task team itself, which definitely tells you that the race is quite on and it's going to be a tight race, probably as tight as 2017, if not tighter.
But when we look at Dr. Zweli Mkhize's candidacy, he was a member of the top six in the capacity of TG ahead of Nasrec in 2017. He may have not been president, but surely his impact would have been felt as somebody of influence on the top six. But he was snubbed for the position of president in 2017 at Nasrec. What do you think he has displayed this time around that appeals to the youth of the African National Congress?
There is nothing that he brings to the table, to tell the truth. This is just a coalition of the wounded that needed to find a strong candidate. And I think I sort of indicated to some people as we were leaving Nasrec in 2017 that in actual fact, if the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal wants to regroup and probably find somebody that they can rally behind, it would have to be Dr. Zweli Mkhize. Of course, then there were no scandals such as digital vibes that were out there in the open. Much has changed since 2017. You are quite correct. In 2017, even KwaZulu-Natal itself, I think he received 6 branch nominations throughout the province to become, president, received 1 regional a nomination in Alfred Nzo in the Eastern Cape to become deputy president. And of course, none of that manifested. But his political, stature was quite evident in how President Ramaphosa then tasked him with, becoming Minister of Health and ensuring that he's included in his cabinet. So that told you that he does hold some political sway. But I'm afraid there's nothing really that he brings to the table. I mean, this is the same youth league that has been calling for an intergenerational mix. I'm not sure if they believe that someone of Dr. Mkhize's stature is that kind of person to take forward, this intergenerational question. But by far and large, the top 6 appears to be more a mix of power plays and power dynamics across the different provinces, rather than it being a reflection of what the ANC Youth League is looking for in terms of intergenerational mix. I mean, that you have nobody below 40 years, and this is coming from a youthful structure in the top 6, is already an indictment on the very Youth League task team.
But listening to Sizopila and other interviews, she went on to state that for them, when they talk of generational mix, they do to a certain extent not necessarily, or they don't necessarily mean that it would have to be somebody below 40, but somebody that perhaps has moved through the ranks of the ANC Youth League, just like a Fikile Mbalula would have. So in that instance, they were saying that they did actually put those who were once leaders of the Youth League, not necessarily that it had to be about age, where it's somebody below 40 that they put on the top 6.
That is a cop-out argument for having failed to agree on just one name of a young person to champion in the top 6. They must go back to history and learn from the Youth League of 1944, 1948, and how in the 1950s they were immediately beginning to swell the ranks of top leadership within the African National Congress. There is no way of getting out of an argument that it appears that even the youth structure of the ANC is not ready to champion a young person in the top 6. Intergenerational mix means exactly that. That young people are ready to serve, they are ready to lead, and it must be demonstrated in the various organizational structures that are there. Otherwise, they are simply gatekeeping, even them as young people. I mean, of course, if you look at their national executive, committee lineup, it starts right at the top
first,
with
yes.
it starts with the members that are there. So if they are ready to knock so closely to the top 6, what makes it difficult for them to champion a really young person? Because ordinarily, in Mfundo, everybody in the ANC, at least as per its tradition, is somewhat expected to have come through the ranks of the youth league. But to say you will champion Fikile Mbalula at his old age because he was in the youth league is a cop-out argument.
But is it not perhaps also them honestly reflecting that at this point, maybe the old guard in the party did not groom them or did not support them enough for them to actually put forward a candidate from their generation? At this point, is it not reflective of a dysfunctional NEC itself, where there's always this tug of war, where the younger feel that the older don't want to share their wisdom or groom them in any way, they're holding on to power? So is it not indicative of that particular problem here, that they're saying this is where we are, we at this point can only put forward names for the NEC, but most certainly not the top 6, because the leaders have not been generous in sharing their wisdom?
The truth of it is that the leaders will never necessarily open up the space, because the leaders in the ANC have demonstrated that they have no appetite to let go. I mean, you've got somebody in that top 6. Gwede Mantashe has been there since 2007, and he's still available to go on. So you've got a problem of leaders that do not want to leave, and that's a serious issue. However, in that meeting of young people, there were no old people trying to persuade them. Well, at least not in the room, but given how we know the ANC works, it might have been that there were old people on cell phones, on people's messages, and all of this, trying to persuade the young people into a particular direction. But the truth is that if young people do not stand up for their own power, their own bargaining in the ANC, all that they risk doing is being contaminated by the very politics of older people that you are pointing to, which have led the ANC down this rabbit hole that it finds itself in, where it's talking about renewal, it's talking about unity, but you get no sense of what this renewal means. You have no people that appear to be championing this renewal, and there's absolutely no unity in the organization, and nobody's trying to foster that unity. So young people must then, in this crisis the ANC finds itself, carve out a way for themselves to be the direction and pathfinders for the organization. But if they're going to play in the established rules of the establishment, which are the older people in the organization, they are not going to have the kind of disruptive effect they are looking for in terms of defining the future of the ANC, a future that they may still want to inherit. Otherwise, at this rate, the young people will inherit an ANC that is in opposition benches.
But if we look broadly at the list, the NEC members here, if this were to be endorsed, it would most certainly disrupt or shake the baobab to a certain extent, because there are a number of those they would consider the royalty within the ANC that have not made it here. If you looked at that list, it seemed, even to a certain extent, if some would be mischievous, to say it was somewhat RET leaning. What did you make of just the list? Does that not cause some sort of a disruption?
Look, I mean, RET versus CR, for me, these are things that no longer matter. I'm really trying to understand the shift in the balance of forces and what kinds of negotiations are going to take place. There's much more fluidity now. But I get the point you are trying to drive, that, a certain historic faction appears to have emerged to consolidate power, definitely within the Youth League. That's what seems to have happened. Those who were seen to be aligned with President Ramaphosa somewhat do not find much joy. But the point I want to make, Mfundo, just before you run out of time, is that as much as this list has young people, if you look at who they are the same young people who couldn't take the ANC Youth League to a conference. And the signs were there as early as March when they started postponing their conferences. So what caliber of young people are on this list? What do they bring to the table politically, administratively, and visionary when they couldn't lead their own structure to a conference? And we're now going to get to December and the Youth League will not have gone to a conference. It's just been multiple postponements. Does that tell us something about the caliber of these young people, and should we worry that they are the type of young people that might swell the ranks of the National Executive Committee? Well, we will leave that to ANC members.